Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are jumping right into a totally fascinating, speculative future history scenario drawn straight from our source material. We're going to break down a highly complex, hypothetical 10-year intelligence operation. It's essentially a masterclass narrative that maps out exactly how intelligence agencies might plan, execute, and actually succeed in tracking an entirely untrackable target. The source drops us right into the deep end with a high-stakes narrative. We're focusing on an individual who, for nearly 4 decades, was considered a virtually untouchable target. We're talking about Iran's supreme leader. Picture a guy surrounded by thousands of elite guards, operating out of deeply fortified underground bunkers with multiple overlapping layers of cutting-edge security. For a very long time, eliminating this figure wasn't just hard, it was considered an absolute impossible target. So you have to ask yourself, how does a 10-year plan to eliminate a supreme leader actually unfold? Let's dive into this and map out exactly how a total strategic deadlock slowly transformed into a pinpoint multi-layered strike. Because as the source lays out so well, this wasn't about getting lucky. It was about a meticulous, decade-long game of multi-dimensional chess, involving cyber warfare, shifting global politics, and just unprecedented levels of surveillance. Part 1, a shift in strategy from nuclear sites to leadership. We're going to start right at the inciting incident that fundamentally altered the intelligence playbook in this scenario. What's absolutely crucial to understand here is the massive strategic pivot. Before 2018, the approach was basically a holding pattern, a high-stakes game of whack-a-mole. Bombing physical nuclear sites, assassinating individual scientists, just trying to slow the timeline down. But that just created this constant rebuilding loop. The leadership would simply pick up and shift the program to a new, secret location. So the new approach demanded a permanent solution. The goal shifted completely to eliminating the symbol in the core leadership, directing the entire apparatus. And the trigger for this massive shift happened in January 2018. According to the source, Mossad executed this wild, highly complex infiltration of a warehouse in Tehran. Operatives literally used blowtorches to cut into iron safes and managed to steal half a ton of secret nuclear documents and disks. That half-ton data was a massive reality check. It revealed all these hidden underground locations that weren't even visible to satellites. It forced intelligence agencies to face the music. As long as that core team was intact, the nuclear program was never, ever going to end. Section 2, the ultimate fortress, inside the Pasture Street compound. To really grasp the sheer scale of this hypothetical operation, we have to understand what the target's defenses actually looked like. To put the sheer difficulty into perspective, the source details a secondary underground bunker in the Lavassan area. This thing was so incredibly deep, you're looking at a full 5-minute elevator descent just to reach the front doors. 5 minutes! It was custom designed to withstand heavy bunker buster bombs, like the massive GBU-57. We aren't talking about a reinforced spaceman here. This was essentially a subterranean city. Up on the surface, the 30-acre Pasteur Street compound was just an absolute fortress. It has the Supreme Leader's office and dozens of top government headquarters, totally locked down by 3 unprecedented layers of security. You had a 500-meter outer radius guarded by elite Vali Ammar forces answering only to the leader himself. Then, a 350-meter secondary perimeter. Finally, rapid reaction units stationed on every single building. Throw in rotating cameras, frequency detectors, mobile phone jammers, and physical anti-rocket iron nets. It's virtually impregnable. But wait, it gets even crazier. Beneath all of that surface-level security, an intricate 5-kilometer tunnel network provided completely undetected movement. This subterranean web featured 8 hidden exits that popped up right into civilian infrastructure. Think multi-story parking garages, children's football schools, vaccination centers, and hospitals. It turned the target area into an absolute geographic nightmare for any potential strike, designed specifically to completely shield their movements from the sky. Section 3. Gathering the intelligence. The escalation of surveillance. Because cracking a fortress like that requires an incredibly tight web of espionage. You don't just hack into a system like this overnight. The infiltration evolved from old-school spycraft to a massive coordinated cybernet. Step 1 was human assets on the ground, plumbers and cleaners, checking food deliveries and sorting through the compound's literal trash. Then things escalate. They deployed Pegasus spyware to compromise the phones of the leader's guards, drivers, and even his doctors. Next, they exploited a bug to hack thousands of Chinese-made street cameras all across Tehran. And finally, they brought in the big guns, advanced AI, and satellite tracking. The aerial intelligence gathered here was staggeringly precise. The source notes that U.S. KH-11 satellites orbiting 500 kilometers above the Earth were calculating the exact heights of shadows just to pinpoint which specific rooftop had which antenna. Meanwhile, Orion satellites tracked encrypted radio signals and walkie-talkie chatter and beamed all that raw data straight to a secret CIA processing center out in the Australian desert. They were literally tracking what food was being ordered into the compound in real time. Now, humans obviously can't process millions of gigabytes of raw data fast enough. So, to make sense of this endless stream of information, they relied on AI, specifically the Maven Smart System. Developed for the Pentagon, this software ingested thousands of camera feeds, tapped phone calls, and satellite images. In just 90 minutes, with a 98.7% accuracy rate, it could predict the target's patterns of life. It tracked shift changes, predicted convoy routes, and even deeply analyzed the Supreme Leader's unique walking posture just to ensure they weren't looking at a body double. But as the source makes very clear, the target wasn't just sitting there helplessly. They employed extreme countermeasures to evade those eyes in the sky. By 2023, security outright banned all electronic gadgets for their staff. High-level visitors, they were completely blindfolded before ever entering the bunker. The security teams also meticulously calculated the exact orbits of those U.S. satellites and perfectly timed their movements so they only happened within the satellite's blind spots. They even went so far as to wire the entire compound with fiber optic cables, so internal communications would travel via light pulses, making them completely invisible to the Orion satellites overhead. Section 4. The geopolitical window. Waiting for the right time. Because, let's be real, having the military capability means absolutely nothing if you don't have the political environment to back it up. The timeline maps out how shifting global politics finally provided the diplomatic cover required to authorize a permanent strike. The source notes a triggering event in October 2023 that fundamentally shifted global sympathy. Following a tense period where the U.S. administration actually blocked retaliatory action, a November 2024 U.S. election changed the diplomatic backing entirely. That paved the way for joint airstrikes in June 2025, culminating in a highly secret November 2025 meeting between top intelligence heads that firmly locked in a final strike date for the first quarter of 2026. There's this one detail from those initial 2025 airstrikes that is just utterly fascinating. The source points out that the Supreme Leader intentionally degraded his video broadcasts from inside the Love-Is-On bunker. By pushing out a video with a terrible low-quality bitrate and deliberately blurred audio, he successfully hid the acoustic signature of his bunker. Things like ventilation hums and generator noise were scrubbed, entirely preventing intelligence agencies from calculating the depth and the layout of his safe haven. Section 5, Execution of the Strike, a minute-by-minute breakdown. All right, let's dive into the climax of the source's narrative. February 28, 2026. This is where an entire decade of planning converges into one single morning. The execution was this incredibly rapid, highly coordinated assault that took just over 2 hours from launch to devastating impact. At exactly 7:30 a.m., fighter jets launched from regional bases. By 7:50 a.m., right as they neared Iranian airspace, all mobile towers around the Pasteur Street compound were heavily jammed to completely sever the flow of information. Finally, at 9:40 a.m., over 30 hypersonic Blue Sparrow missiles struck the exact pinpoint location where the core leadership was meeting. Now, how do you punch through a sky full of advanced air defenses? Well, that decade of cyber preparation allowed them to instantly collapse the network. They activated dormant supply chain malware, stuff embedded years prior, which paralyzed the targeting computers on the S-300 radar screens. US EA-18G aircraft out in the Persian Gulf blasted electromagnetic waves to jam whatever frequencies were left. Meanwhile, thousands of pre-smuggled drones that had been hidden right inside Iran were suddenly activated to destroy the anti-air batteries from within. Field command contact was totally severed. The skies were just completely laid bare. Section 6. The unanswered questions. The inside job? Because even with all this space-age technology, the source leaves us with a haunting twist about how this was all practically possible. The psychological warfare of this operation was absolute next level. Just 12 minutes after the missiles hit, a common religious app called Bade Sabah, which is installed on millions of Iranians' phones just to show prayer times, was hacked. It sent out massive push notifications telling the public help has arrived and explicitly urging the Iranian army to surrender. It's a staggering display of just how deeply Mossad and the CIA had compromised everyday civilian tech infrastructure. But as the source notes, hitting an unexpected surface meeting with such perfect timing leaves us with a highly provocative thought. See, that leadership meeting was originally planned for the bunker at night, but was suddenly moved up to the surface in the morning, and Israeli intelligence knew about the change within hours. So despite the billions of dollars spent on AI, the shadow measuring satellites, and all the complex cyber malware, did this entire operation ultimately hinge on an inside man? The source points out a key general, Ismail Khani, who suspiciously survived the strike after stepping out of the room mere moments before the impact, and was later arrested. It really leaves us wondering, in an age dominated by the most advanced technology in human history, does the ultimate success of an operation still just rely on human betrayal? Think about that for a bit. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and we will catch you next time.